Imagine walking into your basement and discovering a door that was never supposed to exist. A door hidden behind concrete, chained, locked, forgotten. Now imagine what might be behind it. Because in 2018, that exact moment happened inside a quiet home in the United States. What they found behind that wall wasn't an object. It was a person who had been missing for 23 years. A person the world had already given up on. But the most disturbing part wasn't the room. It wasn't the chains. It wasn't even the years of silence. It was who put her there. Someone she trusted. Someone who was supposed to protect her. Someone who lived upstairs every single day while she was trapped below. This is not just a story. This is a discovery that shocked investigators, terrified a community, and exposed a secret that was never meant to be found. And I promise you, the deeper this story goes, the darker it becomes. But before we begin, comment 23 years below if you believe no secret stays hidden forever. And subscribe now, because on this channel, we uncover the stories the world tried to forget. Let's begin. July 18, 1995. Cleveland, Ohio. 2:14 a.m. Mercy General Hospital was quiet in the way hospitals only are in the middle of the night. Machines hummed softly. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. And exhausted nurses moved through the halls like ghosts, finishing the last hours of their shift. Rebecca Harper was one of them. At 39 years old, she was known as someone who never left early. She stayed longer than anyone else, double-checking charts, adjusting blankets, making sure her patients were comfortable, even when no one was watching. Her coworkers often joked that Rebecca cared too much. But that night, her body had reached its limit. She stood at the nurse's station, pen in hand, updating a patient's file. Her movements slowed. Her fingers tightened around the pen. Then suddenly, she stopped breathing normally. The pen slipped from her hand. And before anyone could react, Rebecca Harper collapsed onto the cold hospital floor. The sound echoed through the hallway. Within seconds, nurses rushed to her side. Rebecca, can you hear me?" A crash cart was wheeled in. Hands moved quickly. Voices overlapped. But no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't bring her back. The woman who had spent her life saving others was gone. Just like that. At home, her daughter had no idea her world had just ended. Emily Harper was only 17 years old. She sat on the living room couch, waiting for the familiar sound of her mother's car pulling into the driveway, waiting for the front door to open, waiting to hear her voice say, "I'm home." But that moment never came. Instead, hours later, there was a knock at the door. Two hospital staff members stood outside. Their faces said everything before they spoke. Neighbors would later remember the silence that followed. Emily didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, frozen, as if her mind refused to accept what her heart already understood. In the days that followed, she barely left the house. Neighbors sometimes saw her standing behind the screen door, staring out at the street, watching, waiting, as if part of her still believed her mother might come back. But she never would. And now, Emily had only one parent left. Her father, Daniel Harper. Daniel was 43 years old. He worked at the same hospital Rebecca had worked at. He was known as calm, professional, and deeply private. He spoke softly. He dressed neatly. And he carried himself like a man who never lost control. To everyone around him, Daniel appeared heartbroken. He walked with slower steps. He spoke less. He kept his eyes lowered. People pitied him. They brought food. They offered prayers. They told him he was strong. And he accepted their sympathy quietly. But grief can wear many disguises. And Daniel wore his perfectly. Just 3 weeks after Rebecca's funeral, Daniel made an announcement that surprised everyone. He resigned from his job. His co-workers were confused. "You're leaving?" one nurse asked gently. Daniel nodded. "I can't stay here," he said quietly. "Everything reminds me of her. I need to focus on Emily now." His answer sounded like love, like responsibility, like sacrifice. No one questioned it. No one suspected anything. Because why would they? He was a grieving husband, a devoted father, a man trying to rebuild his life. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. At first, family members checked on Emily regularly. Her aunt called every week. Her cousins asked to visit. But Daniel always had an explanation. She's staying with relatives in Michigan, he told one person. She needed a fresh start. To another, he said she had enrolled in a private school. She needs structure after losing her mother. His voice was calm, convincing, certain, and people believed him, because trusting him was easier than questioning him. Slowly, the calls became less frequent. The visits stopped. Emily Harper faded from everyone's daily life. Not because anyone saw her leave, but because her father said she had. And that was enough. The neighbors continued their routines. They saw Daniel mowing the lawn, taking out the trash, attending church on Sundays. He smiled politely. He waved. He said all the right things. And behind the walls of his quiet suburban home, a different reality was taking shape. One no one could see. One no one wanted to imagine. Because Emily Harper hadn't gone anywhere. She was still there. Still inside that house. Still under her father's control. And very soon, her life would change forever. August 2nd, 1995. Cleveland, Ohio. 8:47 p.m. The house had never felt this quiet before. After Rebecca's death, silence settled into every corner of the Harper home. The laughter was gone. The warmth was gone. Even the air itself felt heavier. Emily sat alone on her bed, staring at the wall. She hadn't returned to school. She hadn't seen her friends. Her father told everyone she needed time to heal. But inside the house, something else was changing. Daniel Harper had begun spending more time in the basement. At first, Emily didn't think much of it. The basement had always been his space. He kept tools there, old boxes, things no one else needed. But now, he went down there every single day, and he stayed there for hours, sometimes late into the night. She could hear it from upstairs, the sound of metal scraping, the dull pounding of tools, the dragging of something heavy across the floor. Each noise sent a quiet sense of unease through her chest. One night, curiosity overcame her. She stepped out of her bedroom and slowly walked toward the basement door at the end of the hallway. The light underneath the door was on. She hesitated. Then she reached for the handle and opened it. The air that drifted up from below was cold, cold and stale. The wooden stairs creaked under her weight as she slowly descended. "Dad?" she called softly. No answer. She stepped down further. The basement looked different. New boards leaned against the walls. Tools were scattered across the floor. Dust filled the air. And in the far corner, Daniel stood facing the wall. His back was toward her. He didn't turn around. "Dad?" she said again. This time he froze. Slowly he turned his head. The look in his eyes was something she had never seen before. Not sadness. Not grief. Something else. Something empty. Something cold. "What are you doing down here?" he asked. His voice was calm. Too calm. "I was just—" Emily hesitated. "I heard noises." They stared at each other in silence. For a moment, neither moved. Then Daniel forced a small smile. "I'm renovating," he said. "Trying to keep busy." Emily nodded slowly. It made sense. At least, she wanted it to. "Okay," she said quietly. She turned and walked back upstairs. But as she reached the top of the stairs, she felt it. That feeling, that something wasn't right. Behind her, Daniel watched her leave. And once she was gone, his expression changed again. Over the next few days, his behavior became stricter. He began locking doors. He asked more questions. "Where are you going? What are you doing? Who were you talking to?" Emily started feeling like a guest in her own home. Or worse, like someone being watched. One afternoon, she mentioned seeing her friend Rachel. Daniel's response was immediate. No. His voice wasn't loud, but it was absolute. "You need to stay here," he said. "You're not ready to be around people." Emily didn't argue. She had never seen him like this before. Controlled. Unyielding. Different. Then came the night everything changed. August 17th, 1995. 10:32 p.m. Emily was asleep when she heard the sound of her bedroom door opening. She opened her eyes. Her father stood in the doorway. His face was unreadable. "Come with me," he said. Her heart began to beat faster. "Why?" "I need your help with something." His voice allowed no room for refusal. She followed him down the hallway, step by step, toward the basement door. Her stomach tightened. A quiet sense of dread spread through her body. He opened the door. The darkness below waited. He reached for the light switch. The bulb flickered on. He gestured toward the stairs. "Go down." She hesitated. Every instinct told her something was wrong. But he was her father, and she trusted him. So she obeyed. She stepped down into the basement. One step, then another. Behind her, she heard his footsteps follow. When she reached the bottom, she turned to face him. "What do you need help with?" For a moment, he didn't answer. He just stood there, looking at her. Then quietly, he said, "Stay here. I'll be right back." He turned and walked upstairs. Emily waited. She heard his footsteps above her. Then, the basement door closed. A second later, she heard the sound that would change her life forever. Click. The unmistakable sound of a lock. Emily froze. Her heart began pounding. She ran to the stairs. "Dad." She grabbed the handle. It wouldn't move. "Dad." Her voice cracked. She pulled harder. Nothing. The door stayed shut. Locked. Sealed. And for the first time in her life, Emily Harper realized she wasn't in the basement anymore. She was trapped inside it. At first, Emily believed someone would come. She counted the days by her meals. 3 trays meant one day had passed. She memorized every sound above her head. Footsteps, doors closing, water running through pipes. Proof that life still existed just out of reach. Proof that she was still part of the world. But days became weeks. Weeks became months. And slowly, hope began to rot. Daniel visited her on a strict schedule. Always calm. Always controlled. He never shouted. That was the terrifying part. He spoke to her like nothing was wrong. Like this was normal. He brought her food, blankets, sometimes books. He even installed a small television years later. Not out of kindness, but control. He wanted her alive. He wanted her dependent. He wanted her to understand that he was the only connection she had left to existence. Emily tried to resist in the beginning. She screamed until her voice failed. She pounded the walls until her knuckles split open. She begged him, cried, promised anything. But the walls didn't answer, and neither did the world. Eventually, her body adjusted to survival mode. Her mind did something else. It retreated. She stopped thinking about escape. Because thinking about escape meant thinking about freedom. And freedom was too painful to imagine. Years passed. Daniel reinforced the room, added more locks, more barriers, more insurance. The basement became his secret kingdom, and Emily became its prisoner. But Daniel didn't stop living his normal life. He went to work, talked to neighbors, smiled, paid bills, attended neighborhood cookouts. People trusted him. They saw him as quiet, private, respectable. No one suspected what existed beneath their feet. No one imagined that just below their conversations and laughter, a young woman sat in silence, listening, waiting, a ghost buried alive. Time changed Emily. Her reflection slowly became unrecognizable. Her hair grew long and uneven. Her skin lost its warmth. Her muscles weakened from confinement. But her mind adapted in ways Daniel didn't expect. She began observing him, studying his habits, his routines, his mistakes, because no one is perfect forever. And over time, Daniel began to slip. Small things at first. Forgetting to lock one of the outer barriers immediately. Taking longer to check the room. Getting older. Slower. Less careful. Age was doing what resistance never could. Weakening him. Upstairs, life continued. Seasons came and went. Winters buried the house in snow. Summers filled the neighborhood with laughter. Children grew up. Families moved away. But Emily never saw the sun. She only saw the artificial glow of a bulb that Daniel controlled. Light and darkness existed only when he decided. He controlled her days. He controlled her nights. He controlled her reality. But even after years of isolation, something inside Emily refused to die completely. A small, stubborn part of her still believed in the possibility of escape. She didn't know when. She didn't know how. But she knew one thing for certain. Daniel was human, and humans make mistakes. She just had to survive long enough to see one. She just had to wait. And eventually, that moment would come. But not in the way either of them expected. Because after 23 years, it wouldn't be Emily who found the way out. It would be someone with a hammer, and a wall that finally gave up its secret. October 14th, 2018. Cleveland, Ohio. 9:13 a.m. The renovation crew had been working in the Harper home's basement for less than an hour when something felt wrong. The house had recently been sold. Daniel Harper, now 67 years old, had quietly moved into an assisted living facility 2 months earlier. According to neighbors, he had become weak, forgetful, slower than the man they once knew. The new owners wanted to remodel the basement. Nothing unusual. At least, that's what everyone thought. Until Mark Delaney, one of the contractors, swung his hammer against the far concrete wall. The first strike landed with a dull, heavy thud. Normal. But the second strike sounded different. Hollow. Mark froze. He frowned and leaned closer, tapping the spot lightly with the metal head of his hammer. The sound echoed back. That wasn't right. Concrete wasn't supposed to sound like that. He called over his coworker. "You hear that?" The other man knocked against the wall. Same hollow response. They exchanged a look. Something was behind it. At first, they assumed it was an old storage space or abandoned piping. Nothing alarming. Mark raised the hammer again and struck harder this time. A crack split through the surface. Dust spilled into the air. Another hit. The concrete fractured further, revealing something underneath. Not empty space. Not pipes. Wood. A wooden surface hidden behind the concrete layer. Carefully, they chipped away more of the wall. What emerged made their stomachs tighten. It was a door. A full-size door. Sealed behind concrete. And wrapped tightly with a heavy metal chain. The chain was secured with a thick, rusted padlock. Locked from the outside. The entire basement went silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Because there was only one reason to lock a door like that. To keep something inside. Or someone. Mark felt a growing unease crawl up his spine. His instincts told him this wasn't normal construction work anymore. He stepped back. "I'm calling this in." Within minutes, police arrived. Officers examined the door carefully. One of them tugged the chain. It didn't budge. Another officer called for bolt cutters. The room felt colder. Heavier. No one knew what they were about to uncover. When the bolt cutters snapped through the chain, the sound rang sharply through the basement. The chain fell to the floor with a metallic crash. One officer reached forward slowly and turned the handle. For a moment, it didn't move. Then, with pressure, the door creaked open. A foul, stale smell poured out instantly. Air that hadn't circulated in years. The officers shined their flashlights into the darkness. What they saw didn't make sense at first. A small room. Bare walls. A mattress. A table. Water containers. And then, movement. One officer froze. "Did you see that?" The flashlight beam steadied. And there, in the corner of the room, was a woman. She flinched at the light, shielding her eyes. Her skin was pale. Her hair hung unevenly around her shoulders. Her body was thin, fragile. She looked terrified, confused, like she didn't understand what was happening, or if it was real. For a moment, no one spoke. No one breathed, because they realized something impossible. She was alive. After all those years, she was alive. One officer stepped forward carefully. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe now." The woman didn't respond. She simply stared, her eyes adjusting to something she hadn't seen in decades. New faces, new voices, freedom. Her name, they would soon confirm, was Emily Harper, Daniel Harper's daughter. Missing since 1995. Declared gone. Forgotten by time. But never gone. Not really. She had been there the entire time. Beneath their feet. Behind that wall. Waiting. Surviving. Emily couldn't walk properly when they helped her out. Her legs trembled under her own weight. And used to supporting her. And used to freedom. When she reached the top of the basement stairs, she stopped. Sunlight streamed faintly through the living room window. She stared at it like it was something sacred. Something unreal. Tears rolled silently down her face. For the first time in 23 years. She felt the sun. News spread fast. Police located Daniel Harper within hours at his assisted living facility. He didn't resist arrest. He didn't deny it. He didn't explain. Neighbors stood outside their homes in shock as police escorted him into a squad car. The man they trusted. The man they greeted. The man who smiled politely for decades. Had hidden the unthinkable beneath their feet. Investigators later discovered how carefully he had constructed the hidden room. The reinforced walls. The soundproofing. The concealed entrance. Everything designed to ensure no one would ever find her. everything designed to erase her from existence. But time had done what no one else could. It had weakened him, forced him to leave the house behind. And in doing so, he left the secret behind too, waiting for a hammer, for a crack in the wall, for the truth to finally breathe. Emily Harper stepped into a world that had moved on without her. Technology had changed. People had changed. Everything had changed. But she had survived. She had endured 23 years in darkness. And somehow, she was still standing. Because even behind concrete, behind locks, behind silence, hope had refused to die. She spent 23 years behind a wall. 23 years without sunlight, without freedom, without a voice. And the most terrifying part? She wasn't hidden in some remote forest. She wasn't buried in an abandoned building. She was inside a normal house, in a normal neighborhood, living beneath people who had no idea she was there. Which raises a disturbing question. How many secrets are still hidden behind walls no one has opened yet? Emily survived because of one moment, one sound, one crack that wasn't supposed to exist. If that wall had never been broken, she might have never been found. And that changes everything, because it proves something chilling. Sometimes, the truth isn't lost. It's just waiting to be discovered. If this story shocked you, comment found below. Because every comment helps keep stories like this alive. Stories that remind the world what can happen in silence. And if you want more real, disturbing, and unforgettable stories that most people have never heard, subscribe now. Because the next story you hear might be even more disturbing than this one. And once you hear it, you won't forget it.